Hi all, there was a very interesting game played yesterday in the World Championship candidates between Fabiano Caruana and Vishy Anand, so 23rd of March 2016. Let's have a look. C4 from Fabiano. So E5, we have a very popular variation of the English opening. Most popular here is Knight F3, trying to tempt maybe the black pawn forward. Rarely players do that actually. This is better. Knight C6. G3, Bishop B4. This is the main move. Bishop G2. Mainline stuff. And now black plays E4, and you might remember this is following Kasparov against Karpov lines in the World Championship matches. And there was a very interesting innovation in one of the games coming up here after F3, where Karpov had played E3 and won quite a very beautiful, interesting game with E3. But there's another move here which is also quite popular, which is E takes F3, and that was played by Vishy Anand. Knight takes F3. So what's happened here? Black has got some pressure on the E file, white on the F file. The double pawns, you might think, are they going to be a liability? Or are they controlling useful squares? It's a very interesting dynamic position for both sides. D5, not minding about undoubling the pawns because there'll be square weaknesses which might be more easy to exploit. Now usually here players with white don't play C takes D5. On C takes D5 there's a few games, but black is meant to be okay here. That was attacking the queen, by the way, the queen fleeing here. This is meant to be okay, this position. It's not much advantage, really. In fact, black might be doing very well here. This position in particular is to be avoided. So, more dynamic it seems after D5 is what was played, and this is the most popular move, to play D4. Just let the C4 pawn go. Try and basically undermine black's control of the E4 square. And quite often, though, players do not take on C4. They play Knight E4. This is quite a popular move. But in this game, we do see D takes C4. And usually Bishop G5. This is in live, but there's 6 main games, at least with Bishop G5 here. And this is what usually happens. In this game, we get kind of an innovation now. Queen C2 is played instead. But Bishop G5, just for those theoretically interested, you could have this continuation where, okay, the queen's temporarily a target on the F file, but E4 is usually played here, and white's established basically a nice pawn center. And yeah, this sort of thing's been seen before, where white's got a nice pawn center. It seems black's got some pressure potentially on the center, but okay, an interesting position. So Bishop G5 is usually, it's the most common move. Yeah, being able to give up the bishop on H6, that's what usually happens. But here, this Queen C2, very intriguing move, Queen C2. And it does set up some direct threats like Knight G5, just looking at H7. Because then there'll be rook takes f6 using the f file pressure, and then queen takes h7. I know it's pretty crude, but you can imagine it's more dangerous than usual because this bishop can also come around the corner here as well. So this is taken very seriously, this knight g5, and it is. H6 parries against knight g5, and now white reinforces the e4 square, not the e4 square grip, the e5 square grip. So e5 is looked at, knight e4. Now rook ad1, as though maybe things like knight e5 are on the cards, or d5 one day. We have bishop f5, and it looks kind of scary for this discovered attack on the queen. But Caruana plays a very interesting move, knight e5. Yeah, and you might think, well, why not? This move, knight takes g3, that protects the bishop and hits the queen. It's a really interesting position to analyse. It's intriguing, really. But what else is white actually doing here? Because it looks as though queen c2 is a source of embarrassment after this bishop f5. So this must have been some sort of preparation. I mean, let's have a look at this position. If white does anything else apart from knight e5, I think maybe black's just better. If the queen flees away, it wastes the idea. This cannot be the idea of queen c2 if this is preparation, because this position is just nice for black, this kind of scenario where the knights are really good. Black's got a massive grip on the light squares in the center. This is just to be avoided. White's got some bad weaknesses here. So the idea is definitely not to retreat the queen. This is definitely like the prepared idea. And the sharpest test would seem to be knight takes g3. We get knight d6 in the game. On knight takes g3, I'm turning off. I'll look at show you some prepared stuff from earlier. Now this is a critical line. It wasn't played. Knight d6 was played in the game, and it's very interesting. e4, white giving up an exchange. Black could play this desperado. Knight takes h2, and it's an unbalanced position. Perhaps it's in white's favour. White has two bishops for a rook. Black has some more pawns though. So it's a really unbalanced dynamic position. If we follow up like this, you'll see that yeah, it's probably in white's favour because the bishops are worth more than the rooks. One rook usually, but the pawn situation, yeah, it's in white's favour. So basically, this was avoided. Knight takes g3, although it might be somewhat tempting. Knight d6, and we have e4. Bishop h7. Now you might consider this next move a bit of a waste of time. Why move the queen to c2 and then now move it again? But yeah, it's done its job there. White's established this nice pawn center, and the thing is c4 is vulnerable here. So there's no easy way of like kicking the knight because knight takes c4, for example. So black actually, Vishy Anand plays actually knight e7. And we get a bit of a stunning continuation here, quite shocking. And I am being fairly shocked. I don't know about you guys on YouTube for Caruana in this tournament, the way he viciously attacked Nakamura in an earlier round. He's like, sometimes he puts on a towel type hat. That's a bit of a clue to you. What does white play in this position? I think he's put on this towel hat here, so that's my clue to you. White to play, it's a staggering idea. It really is. Absolutely staggering. I mentioned before, here's another clue, that there was dynamic, play on the F file, but can that be accentuated in some way as well? So that's another clue. If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video, what would you play in this position? So starting from now. Okay, it's amazing. Bishop takes h6. A full piece sack. Difficult for black to avoid it. If knight g6, you might think to try and make this backfire on the e file. But actually, bishop f4 is sufficient here to hold things together. And if f6, then again, we got knight takes c4. So it's accepted. And now queen h5. So white is going to aim for getting another pawn and a vicious attack. And Vishy decided to immediately give back a piece here before further damage is done to his position. He immediately countersacks a piece. So a counter piece defensive idea is played in this position, which is knight ef5. And you might think this is a really shocking game now. It actually protects on route h6 immediately though, and makes way for the queen to come to g5 to defend things. Now, if this isn't played, let's imagine black played king h8. Actually here, white has a strong rook takes f7. Doesn't matter about the h6 pawn for a moment because the knight takes in its check and forking, winning the queen. So it's going to be like, potentially, it's really damaging to black's king safety. If rook f8 here, rook takes, and the other rook comes in quite quickly, and we have this sort of position. And here, it's just really dangerous. There's a threat of queen e5 check. And if we take this further, another pawn bites the dust. And white has a massive position here. Even though he's a piece down, the damage is done so much. We've got let's have a quick look at this one. White's just better here. Principal threats, queen takes h6, as you might expect, to get into f6 or d5. And it's difficult for black to do much here. If, say, queen g6, we can just take that off and get loads and loads of pawns, potentially, with rook takes b7, or even stronger e5. This is just better for white. So it's a really, really interesting dynamic position. You might think, how sound is this? But yeah, I mean, we've mentioned king h8 there. The engine choice is actually, at the moment, knight d5. Let's have a look at this. If queen takes h6, the idea of knight takes c3, collapse white's center. And then we can play this, and apparently this is good for black. So on this line though, e takes, queen g5, same idea as Vishy's. White still maintains a little bit of something here with queen f3. So this is an interesting defensive idea, similar to Vishy's. This knight d5. So this is a really critical and interesting position to analyze. If rook f8, just defending the pawn, queen takes h6. What is white actually doing here? Well, rook f4 is coming around, and rook f6 is dangerous, but rook f4 might be the principal threat. And if here check would drag the king back, and then we've got knight g4, this is vicious for knight h6. You can see how dangerous this illustration is of the position. It's just mega dangerous stuff, where white ends up at least getting the material back, if nothing else, with a crushing position. It's mega dangerous stuff, but yeah, what a fantastic conception. So this rook f8 doesn't seem to do too well in this position. Instead of king h8 here, might be strongest to play something like knight g6. And then, you know, we can carry on with knight g4, threatening knight f6. If f5, again, you know, there's great compensation here, it seems. Rook takes f5. This kind of stuff is still, you know, it's very dangerous for black. So anyway, in the game, yeah, this way was played to try and get the queens off. Knight e f5, a counter sack, e takes, queen g5. Now, actually, white obliged with queen takes g5 and f6, and it's still dangerous for black here. It's equal on pawns, 3, 4, 5, 6, 3, 4, 5, 6. But there's a lot of dangers here for black. One danger, for example, is h1, try and peel open the g file, shuffle around to get using the g file. Another subtle one might be like this, to look at f7. But black plays knight e4. And now this attack on c3 is ignored with rook fe1, believe it or not. And here, this is taken. Rook c1, knight b5. It seems like a strange thing to do, but Vishy is chewing up white's centre here. Bishop takes b7. Rook a8. But now, unfortunately, you know, bishop c6, it does actually win the exchange here. So it looks as though something's gone badly wrong with black's conception of trying to take off these two pawns, which he does, but is the exchange down? Yeah, this looks like the exchange down here. Now, before we go on from that, let's hold on a sec. What was this really necessary? Was knight e4 really necessary here? Was it that bad? I mean, I mentioned some key ideas, like bishop f3 maybe, or h4. What if black played, you know, rook ad8? Let's imagine bishop f3. And what is black actually doing? See here? We can consider just taking, and the thing is about this sort of position is white's centre still seems really secure. White's just better here basically because that centre is pretty solid. So yeah, I guess Vishy was wanting to just knock out the centre, And maybe just expecting rook c1. You know, if rook c1, then, you know, black can carry on. And yeah, but white's not playing that. And also white's not playing this. This might have been a thought, but you know, h4. This is still good for white as well. But white maintains that center. So anyway, in this game continuation after knight e4, yeah, it's intriguing. But if the black knight went back here, protecting b7, right? Bishop d5. This emphasizes some trump cards for white. So knight takes c4 is on the cards. If here, bishop takes c4 then, and white's just better really. White's just better. That c4 pawn is a liability here. So yeah, black had to do something, and this was what was played. So knight e4, just trying to knock out the center, but it's at a cost of technically losing the exchange here. Okay, now we get this position, and black's actually threatening rook takes e5 with knight f3 check to follow. And that's actually elegantly parried with king f2. We have knight c2. That rook now is not subject to perpetual harassment with rook e2, actually, because you might think knight d4 and that's naughty. What's going on here? But in fact, another nifty move is played here, rook ed1, saying to black, look, if you're going to take here, I'll play the check and I'm going to mate you. Let's have a look at that. Takes, that's mating. Because of this fawn pawn, Thorn, fawn pawn is pawning a mating net there. So this is a nifty way of getting that d-file as well. Bishop e4, knight takes c4. White is essentially the exchange up. Now that the dust has settled, white's the exchange up here. Rook e6, check. And the king just gets tucked away again here, inviting black to play rook takes f6, which he does, but now just rook f1, and really black hasn't got sufficient play for being the exchange down. Vishy resigned here. Let's have a look at this final position. He resigned in this position. If black takes here, yeah, it's the exchange down basically. Rook d7. The rook's going to make itself felt. Maybe we can just snap this off and not worry about a2. And we can get this one. And we've got an outside pass pawn now. Anyway, this kind of scenario, it looks pretty lost. It's just the exchange down. So Vishy maybe save his energy for another day. He doesn't want to play the exchange down, particularly at this level. It's not much fun. Yeah, so a very interesting game, and it carries with it a real shocker of an idea, this bishop takes h6. But the opening innovation, queen c2, is also interesting, as if the queen's like a target. So there's some very interesting lines and concepts which the game introduces. But of course, the most Tau-like idea is bishop takes h6. It tore apart black's pawn structure a bit around the king, and that f-file's fully leveraged. It looks like a dynamic feature of the opening, the whole variation, you know, the f-file. And so, you know, the way of accelerating that with bishop takes h6, I think that's another attacking pattern for people's toolkits when they get this f-file pressure to kind of hammer its virtues home. That bishop sack fragmented the pawns, and it seems as though there were a lot of variations white was able then to pile on the pressure dynamically against black's king. Okay, so very interesting game. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.